Dragon's Dogma 2 is by far one of the most anticipated games of 2024 and is a sequel that fans have been waiting for over a decade now. So, having put over 50 hours into Dragon's Dogma 2 already, how does it innovate in the open world action RPG genre, what sets it apart from other titles, and how does it compare to the original? Let's talk about it. Firstly, I will avoid showing any spoilers for any secret bosses, hidden locations, and story reveals. All the footage I'll be showing are things that are already present in the promotional trailers for Dragon's Dogma 2. Secondly, I will disclose that I have yet to finish the game despite having played it for over 50 hours. So this video will be a review in progress, which I will iterate upon once I fully beat the game. And the reason that it's taking me so long to finish Dragon's Dogma 2 is just how massive of a game it is. The sheer size of this game and the content on offer is incredible. The director Hideaki Itsuno has stated that the map size of Dragon's Dogma 2 is 4 times larger than that of the original game. But it honestly feels like an understatement. And that is in no small part because of the way the map is built, but also due to how you travel in Dragon's Dogma 2. Most open world games will have you exploring vast landscapes with the sole intent and design philosophy of creating an open sandbox for you to have fun in. And along the way, you'll find dotted throughout the map some interesting distractions simply put there to retain your attention and guide you to your next point on the list. As such, the devs will try to make these objectives easy to find and reach, letting you take your mount and roam endlessly through the flat terrain in order for it to be as unobtrusive as it can possibly be. In contrast, Dragon's Dogma 2 takes a much more grounded approach. The terrain is rough with cracks and hidden elevation hiding a cave, treasure, or a shortcut. In essence, there is no empty real estate. The world is densely packed and invites those curious enough to explore it with little nooks and crannies for you to find as rewards. But don't misunderstand me though, there are still some of the previously mentioned elements present in Dragon's Dogma 2. You will soon start figuring out where you can expect to find campsites, rift stones, or groups of goblins and bandits. But the design philosophy employed makes for a far more interesting space to traverse. It is a remarkable feat that Capcom has managed to craft this vast world for you to explore and interact with in the ways that you do. But to also make it filled with interesting little secrets and hidden areas for you to find that are worth your time is another thing altogether. And given how limited fast travel is in Dragon's Dogma 2, having to take an ox cart to reach your destination faster, that can also be ambushed by monsters on your way there, or having to use one of your valuable fairy stones to be able to fast travel to a very limited selection of places, means that you will have no other option than to walk on foot for most of the time. And as you traverse these locations, you'll familiarize yourself with the topography. You'll start to understand the ways of the land. You get to learn which shortcuts to take to reach your destination faster and know all the landmarks better than the palm of your hand. And it all culminates into an experience that will leave you with a feeling of realization and satisfaction unlike anything that I have felt before exploring other open worlds. And then you get to have this really cool moment where you have mostly been exploring the kingdom of Vermund and you start to get a full picture of the map. But then you realize that you can also explore the neighboring region of Batal. So you end up with another region that is not only visually striking, but it's also just as much densely packed, if not more than the previous region. But of course, as you'll be traversing through the map, you will be engaging in combat, which is one of Dragon's Dogma 2's biggest appeals. To those not acquainted with combat in Dragon's Dogma, it may initially come across as unintuitive or clunky. There is no traditional lock-on or dodge roll, and in fact, only one of the 10 vocations, the game's equivalent to a traditional class, can equip a shield to block or parry. The game puts a lot more emphasis in your movement, the weight of your attacks, and your decisiveness in combat. You need to pay attention to what the monsters you're fighting are doing, so that you can move out of the way of attacks and position yourself accordingly. That being said, it's not like you cannot have a bunch of different skills that will provide you with some mobility or some other means to deal damage while still evading attacks. Because combat in Dragon's Dogma 2 is not just about using a big powerful skill, the game takes note of the different tactics that you can employ and various different approaches that you can take in combat, with one of the key combat features being the ability to grapple onto enemies. So for example, you can climb onto the back of a griffin and you can start slashing at the wings to make them fall. However, you need to be careful and pay close attention to your stamina, as in this case the griffin will try to shake you off and may potentially even take to the skies, and if you were to fall you are of course going to die. But then again, you can also end up being saved by one of your pawns, which we'll talk about in a moment. So you can use this climbing feature as a way to access a monster's weak spot such as the Cyclops Eye, although it can also lead to some fun emergent gameplay scenarios where you happen to be grappling onto a dragon that after fighting you for a while decides to leave. And so if you have enough stamina, you may just end up being taken to the dragon's nest, where you will have to duke it out with the Drake by yourself as your companions will be far away. I've briefly touched on the 10 vocations that you have available in Dragon's Dogma 2. You begin the game by having 4 starter vocations, of which you can pick one at the start, those being the fighter, the thief, the mage and the archer, each with a totally different playstyle letting you fulfill your class fantasy that came with their own set of skills and equipment that set them apart from the rest of the vocations. And as you play through the game, you'll be able to unlock advanced and hybrid vocations, which become more complex, and with you being able to swap vocations at will, there is a lot of fun and customization to be had in the game, especially with the game's augment system, letting you take passive traits from one of the vocations that you have leveled up and use them on a completely different vocation. Additionally, along your travels, you will come across the so-called Meisters, that will teach you secret techniques if you prove your worth. You'll start off the game by being a raggedy thief, a meek mage, or an unimpressive fighter, but as you progress through the game and you start unlocking different skills, the combat system will feel much more fleshed out and you'll see yourself performing incredible feats that are not only a ton of fun but are also very satisfying and make the game all the more enjoyable. I should also note that there is no set difficulty. That being said, the game will start scaling and throwing you more powerful enemies as you yourself become more powerful and start progressing through the game. One key feature of the combat that is new to the sequel is that each vocation, as opposed to having 2 different set of skills, totaling in 6 different skills with the exception of the warrior in the first game, here in Dragon's Dogma 2 you can equip up to 4 different skills, with the second set of skills being instead replaced with a vocation unique mechanic, which for example in the case of the fighter is going to be a block or a parry, for the thief it's a dodge that can also be used as a gap closer and a combo starter, for the warrior it's a shoulder tackle, so on and so forth. These mechanics that are specific to each vocation tend to be very simplistic with the exception of the hybrid vocations. So in my opinion, unless you are planning on playing the Mystic Spearhand or the Trickster, I feel like the trade-off that was done in Dragon's Dogma 2 is not very worth it. Although I can totally see people disagreeing with me on this point. Ultimately, combat in Dragon's Dogma 2 feels like the perfect evolution of the original game, and not for a single moment has it not been enjoyable. That being said, you are not going to be taking on this journey by yourself. You see, in Dragon's Dogma you play as the Arisen, a character whose heart has been literally taken by a dragon. And now you, the Arisen, a character that you can make in one of the best character creators I have ever seen, has to take on a journey to defeat the dragon and save the world. And along your journey you will be able to employ pawns, which are essentially these NPC entities whose only real purpose in the world is to actually accompany you on your journey. And you even get to make your main pawn as well. However, you can travel with a party of up to 4 characters, which takes us to the game's pawn system, where basically along your travels you will be able to come across various different pawns and you can hire them at any moment to join you. That being said, a very cool thing about the pawn system is that you can employ the main pawns created by other players, essentially allowing you to play this single player game as if it were an asynchronous multiplayer game. And these pawns aren't just going to be NPCs that are there to help you fight different enemies. Sure, you can customize them in the same way that you can customize your own character, letting you change their vocation, skill and equipment, but each of these pawns comes with a different set of personality, inclination and specialization. So you could end up with a pawn that is rash and abrasive, that is all about getting up close into melee action, and the funny thing is that these pawns will take some of these traits from you. So if you are a player that likes to rush in, your main pawn may just end up replicating some of your traits, which could potentially be a negative thing if for example your pawn is a mage, so it wouldn't make much sense for them to get up close to monsters. Though of course the game gives you many ways to be able to change your pawn's inclination, and with how some of these specializations work, allowing for your pawns to be more supportive, or have more utility outside of combat, such as for example being able to speak in Elvish, so you would be able to interact and trade with elves, as otherwise you would not understand them. It's a very robust system that lends itself to some fun and unique emergent gameplay experiences, with one particular note being that if you have a pawn that belonged to a different player that has already completed the quest you are doing, that pawn can offer some indication and guidance, telling you which way to go and how to proceed with the quest you are on. And speaking of quests, I am very happy to report that they are done so much better in Dragon's Dogma 2, with loads of quests having an open-ended approach, letting you side with different characters or resulting in different endings. A lot of the side quests that you do end up being fun and interesting, but not because of an appealing and compelling cast of characters, but because of the way that the game itself builds upon these quests and how they can lead to some exploration and even some evolution in the terrain, with some towns and other locations changing as a result of what you did during the quest. And the towns themselves are pretty big, especially the main town of Vermont with its various different NPCs, with the city having all sorts of hidden quests and paths for you to explore. And then of course we need to talk about the elephant in the room, the topic of conversation that has been everywhere. What is the game's overall performance? For reference, I have been playing this whole time on PC, running on my RTX 4070, and I have had mixed results. The game's overall performance was running for the most part between 40 and 60 FPS, although whenever I would go to towns, the frame rate would go down into the 30s. Tried as I might change different settings, the result was ultimately pretty much the same with one exception. When I went into my graphics options and turned on DLSS, with specifically the auto DLSS, the game started running a lot more smoothly, being able to play pretty much every single time at 60 FPS, with the sole exception being whenever I went to town, although the frame rate there would also be higher, anywhere between 40 and 60 FPS. It's not ideal to have some of these concessions, and I even had ray tracing turned off, although it should be noted that there is a day 1 patch coming with the release of the game, and given Capcom's history with past titles, they tend to release games not fully optimized, so given a week or so, I would expect it to be totally fine. Ultimately, I would say that this has not affected my enjoyment of the game, but if you yourself care about the game's performance above everything else, then I suggest looking into it before purchasing the game. There are many more nice quality of life features that have been added to Dragon's Dogma 2 and have made the game a lot more enjoyable that I haven't covered here on the video. So I will have a video covering my extended thoughts on the game very soon, and of course expect to see a lot of Dragon's Dogma 2 guides very soon. With that being said, I want to say that the wait for the game has been very much worth it. It is pretty much everything that I had hoped it was, and honestly I just want to finish recording the video so I can get back to playing it. I hope it's the same for you, and I hope you have fun with the game as well. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. My name is Dark Hero, and as always, happy hunting!